In the early summer of 1941, an uneasy quiet had settled over much of Eastern Europe. To an outside observer looking at a map, a fragile peace seemed to hold. Germany, under Adolf Hitler, had redrawn the borders of the continent. Poland, Denmark, Norway, the Low Countries, France, the British Empire stood alone, battered but defiant. Yet the longest land border in Europe stretched from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, and it ran between the German Reich and the Soviet Union. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939, a treaty that surprised the world. Map: how Poland and parts of Eastern Europe were carved up. On paper, a non-aggression pact meant they were not enemies. They were trading partners. Soviet oil flowed west. Soviet grain flowed west. Germany supplied manufactured goods and machinery. But beneath this was a deep ideological chasm: Nazism and communism. The German plan for the invasion of the Soviet Union was codenamed Operation Barbarossa, named after a medieval Holy Roman Emperor. The name evoked a historic crusade aligned with the war framed against so-called Judeo-Bolshevism. The primary military objective was simple and audacious: destroy the Red Army in swift, decisive battles in the Western USSR. Fresh from victory in the West, the Germans planned lightning war, fast armoured thrusts with air support. Panzers, supported by the Luftwaffe, would punch through, bypass strongpoints, and race deep into the rear. The goal: encircle vast formations and annihilate them with infantry following behind. 3 massive army groups: north towards Leningrad, center towards Moscow, south into Ukraine and the Caucasus. Army Group North, the symbolic city of Leningrad, birthplace of the revolution. Army Group Center, destroy forces in Belarus, then drive on Moscow. Army Group South, seize Ukraine's grain, the Donets Basin, then the oil fields of the Caucasus, all before winter. Underpinning the strategy was a chilling ideological purpose: a war of annihilation. Orders sanctioned brutality. The Commissar Order and the Hunger Plan foresaw mass murder and starvation. From inception, Barbarossa was a plan for mass killing on an industrial scale. At precisely 3:15 in the morning on June 22, 1941, the German offensive began along an 1,800-mile front from the Arctic Circle to the Black Sea. The world's largest invasion force, over 3 million Germans, with Romanian, Finnish and Hungarian allies, surged across the border. A deafening barrage shattered Soviet lines as the Luftwaffe struck airfields, destroying planes on the ground and seizing air superiority. In the north, under Field Marshal von Leeb, German spearheads slashed through Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, aided by surprise and technical superiority. Within weeks, they were pushing toward Leningrad. At the center, Field Marshal von Bock aimed for Moscow, with twin panzer groups executing classic pincers. Breakthroughs met hundreds of miles inside Soviet territory, trapping armies in the Bialystok and Minsk cauldrons. Hundreds of thousands were captured, seeming to vindicate hopes for a swift victory. To the south, Field Marshal von Rundstedt faced the strongest Soviet concentrations in Ukraine. Vast armoured battles, including Brody, raged. The Germans prevailed through tactical skill. Across the fertile plains, they aimed at Kiev and the East's industrial zones, setting up another encirclement to come. By midsummer, the Wehrmacht's 3 axes carved deep salients into Soviet territory. Success everywhere, and yet a reckoning ahead. The first month of Operation Barbarossa was a period of staggering German success. The speed of the assault, the ferocity, seemed to validate every assumption. On Hitler's maps, divisions moved relentlessly east, swallowing vast swathes. Goebbels declared the Soviet Union fatally wounded. Encirclements defined the phase: Bialystok, Minsk. At Smolensk, pincers closed again. But the Soviets fought with tenacity, costing the Germans time, men, and materiel. In September, after diverting tanks from center, the Germans closed a gigantic trap at Kiev. Over 600,000 Soviet soldiers killed or captured. A great tactical victory, securing Ukraine and stabilizing flanks, but at a tremendous cost in time. Overconfidence masked realities. Infantry lagged behind tanks, panzers wore down. Every mile stretched fragile supply lines. The problem of supply would soon become critical. Even as the road to Moscow seemed open, the seeds of failure were sown. The Soviet response: shock, resistance, scorched earth. The June 22nd shock plunged leadership into paralysis. Stalin, who had dismissed warnings, retreated from view. Pre-war purges had gutted command, communications failed, orders lagged, retreat, stand, counterattack. Chaos led to massive early losses. On July 3rd, Stalin addressed the nation, calling brothers and sisters, army and navy, to a great patriotic war. Total resistance, form partisan units, destroy what cannot be evacuated. Over 1,500 enterprises with millions of workers and families were dismantled and hauled to the Urals and Siberia. In harsh conditions, factories reassembled, soon producing tanks, aircraft and guns. On the battlefield, ordinary soldiers defended every village, every house, every trench with fierce resilience. This resistance drained German forces and slowed the Blitzkrieg, upsetting its timetable. Shock gave way to mobilization. Scorched earth plus relocation created an arsenal beyond German reach. The war in the East was total, engulfing civilians in unimaginable violence and suffering. From day one, the invaders erased lines between combatant and non-combatant, burned villages, mass executions, terror. Behind the troops came the Einsatzgruppen, mobile SS death squads targeting Jews, communist officials, and others. Millions fled east, on foot, on carts, crammed into trains, bombed, strafed, and lost to exhaustion, starvation, and disease. The hunger plan confiscated food and livestock, triggering famine, especially in cities. Millions, chiefly from Ukraine and Belarus, were deported as Ostarbeiter, slave labor in factories and farms, in appalling conditions. Arbitrary violence, public hangings and reprisals destroyed entire communities for single acts of resistance. The invasion marked the beginning of the Holocaust by bullets. At Babi Yar alone, over 33,000 Jews were murdered in 2 days, one site among thousands across the occupied territories. This was a genocidal project that consumed millions of innocents, a human cost we must never forget. We must not forget that human cost. As the German armies pushed deeper during summer and autumn, they confronted an enemy as formidable as the Red Army, distance itself. Blitzkrieg depended on constant flows of fuel, ammunition, and food. As fronts moved east, lines stretched hundreds, then over 1,000 miles, vulnerable to partisans. Dirt tracks turned to seas of mud in the Rasputitsa. Trucks and wagons sank axle-deep, even tracked vehicles struggled. Different rail gauges meant every mile had to be converted before German trains could roll. Mechanical wear was immense. By October, many tank units were below half strength. Spare parts ran short. Exhausted crews kept machines alive. Supplies of food, ammunition, and winter clothing failed to reach the front. Rations shrank. Shells trickled. Infantry that marched from the border were worn out. The tyranny of distance dismantled the effort long before winter. The army at Moscow's gates was a shadow of the force that crossed in June. Well, it was, worn out. In early October 1941, with the ground hardened by the first frosts, the Germans launched Operation Typhoon, the final drive on Moscow. Pincers closed at Vyazma and Bryansk, trapping another 600,000. Some scouts came so close they could allegedly see the Kremlin's spires. Panic gripped Moscow. Government evacuation began. Then the Russian winter arrived early, with a vengeance. Temperatures plunged to -30, -40, even -50 degrees Celsius. The Wehrmacht was catastrophically unprepared. Summer uniforms stuffed with newspapers, frostbite incapacitated tens of thousands. Gun oils froze, weapons jammed, diesel turned to gel. Tanks needed fires beneath engines to start. The Red Army was better prepared, warm uniforms, white camouflage, and tanks designed for the climate. In early December, as the German offensive froze, fresh Siberian divisions struck, veterans of winter warfare. For the first time, the seemingly invincible German army was not just stopped, but thrown into full retreat. The Blitzkrieg had failed. The war would not be over by Christmas. The Battle of Moscow ended Barbarossa and began a long war of attrition. It was, a turning moment. The failure of Barbarossa to secure quick victory in 1941 was the single most important turning point of the Second World War. Defeat before Moscow trapped Hitler in the very scenario he feared, a prolonged two-front war against the British Empire, the Soviet Union, and, after Pearl Harbor, the United States, powers he could not match. The Eastern Front became the primary meat grinder, consuming German manpower and resources. In 6 months, Germany suffered over 1 million casualties, dwarfed by Soviet losses of soldiers and civilians through violence, starvation, and exposure. 1941 left deep scars in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, memory etched into monuments and lives. The war became global and industrial, a struggle of production, logistics, and sheer manpower. Having survived, the Soviet Union regenerated, then stopped, pushed back, and finally destroyed the German army to Berlin in 1945. June 22nd set the course of the 20th century, decisive in defeating Nazism and leading to Europe's division and the Cold War. To understand our world, we must understand that morning when the largest invasion began. And remember not just maps and strategies, but the immense human cost. We must remember